Jim Henson was an incredible innovator. He was never content with how far he had come, and he was always looking to push his medium forward. From Sesame Street and The Muppet Show to The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, and three Muppet movies, he never stopped. Sadly, after contracting what he believed was just a minor illness, he died on May 16th, 1990, at just 53 years old. While Muppet performer Richard Hunt was one of many who performed at his funeral, Hunt himself would die on January 7th, 1992, from AIDS-related complications. These two deaths shook the Muppet world, but the team knew that Henson and Hunt would have wanted the show to go on, so it did. In fact, the first Muppet movie released after their deaths is the one that many fans consider to be the greatest of them all. It's one of the most influential books ever written. Even if you've never read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you are familiar with it. My name is Colin Murr, and I've loved this story for as long as I can remember. I'm going to be looking at every film and TV adaptation of A Christmas Carol I can, because I love the story that much. Join me this season as I go from Mickey Mouse to the Muppets on Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. Season 2, Episode 8, The Show Must Go On, The Muppet Christmas Carol. The original plan was for The Muppet Christmas Carol to be a TV movie, but when Disney read Jerry Juhl's script, they optioned it for a feature film. In the director's chair was Brian Henson, Jim's son who had been working with the company since 1981's The Great Muppet Caper. While there were other actors considered for Scrooge, including previous Bob Cratchit David Warner, it of course famously went to Michael Caine. Caine said, as many know, he didn't want to play the role like it was a comedy, instead taking it completely seriously and treating the Muppets like other actors. Before we go on, we need to talk about the reputation The Muppet Christmas Carol has today. With most films, I don't talk about this from the top, but in this case it's warranted. There are a few takes about this film I've seen repeated online ad nauseum. There's that tweet about Michael Caine treating the Muppets like actors and Tim Curry in Muppet Treasure Island treating himself like a Muppet. There's the other one I see anytime a new Christmas Carol adaptation is announced. The Muppets did it perfectly. Why would you need to make it again? I just don't think this is a fair question when it's classic literature. It's not like, say, The Godfather, which was published in 1969, with the iconic film version coming just 3 years later. A Christmas Carol is a classic novel that's been adapted ever since it was released, long before film. Just because you like the Muppet version best doesn't mean they're going to stop making others. It's important to remember that when Muppet Christmas Carol came out, it wasn't really a critical success. It got mixed reviews, and it grew in popularity over time. These days, you'll find many people praising it as the greatest version of A Christmas Carol, but it took a lot of time to get there. It's become something of an untouchable masterpiece in the minds of many. I was born in 1992, so this very well could have been my first version, but as I've mentioned, that was actually Mickey's Christmas Carol. I saw this movie growing up when it came to the Muppets and Christmas. I watched Muppet Family Christmas a lot growing up, and I have far more nostalgia attached to that. I also watched Muppet Treasure Island endlessly when I was young, far more than Christmas Carol. This is not to say I don't like the film. I just want to establish that I'm reviewing it without nostalgia goggles. While the three previous Muppet movies featured a lot of locations and sets, Muppet Christmas Carol establishes a much tighter look and feel from the get-go. We enter the Muppet City of London during the opening credits, and we meet Gonzo and Rizzo. Gonzo is playing the role of Charles Dickens, and Rizzo is simply playing himself, offering sarcastic commentary throughout and getting into all kinds of Muppet antics. Having Gonzo as Dickens offers the opportunity for a lot of book dialogue, and we do get a good bit.
He was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge.
I do want to point out, though, there are a lot of things Gonzo says that sound like book dialogue that actually aren't.
And with that, the spirits of Scrooge's partners vanished into the darkness, leaving him once again alone in his room.
It's not a criticism of the movie, obviously. Mind you, I just think that there are probably some viewers who think there's even more dialogue here from the book than there really is. Regardless, Gonzo and Rizzo are one of the highlights of the film. Muppet fans like myself who grew up in the 90s tend to view them as just as important to the Muppets as Kermit, Miss Piggy, and Fozzie because of their importance to these 90s films. They really make for a great comedy duo. The song Scrooge introduces our main character, with a bunch of characters on the street singing about how awful he is before Scrooge ever speaks a word about himself. There's a great little detail where Rizzo asks if it's getting colder as Scrooge walks by. referencing the opening narration of the book where Dickens says, quote, "He carried his own low temperature always about with him," unquote. One thing I really like about this song is that it plays Scrooge up to be a cartoonishly evil version of himself. And the Scrooge we get isn't really that. In fact, it even references the fact that there must be a lost, decent person deep down before brushing the idea off entirely. There is one line here that really bugs me, though, and that's when they call Scrooge the undisputed master of the underhanded deed. Now, if this was just a line in the song and nothing else, I'd be fine with it, because the song leans so heavily into caricature. But it does come back later, so trust me, we'll come back to all of this. Scrooge is explicitly a landlord in this version, as we see him talk about mortgages and eviction notices. Kermit the Frog plays Bob Cratchit, and there's also a bunch of rats working for Scrooge as bookkeepers. There's a bit that always cracks me up when the rats want the temperature to be warmer, and when Scrooge threatens to fire them, they break into Harry Belafonte's island in the sun, suddenly dressed in tropical outfits. Great Muppet gag. In addition to Kane, there are a few other human actors in the movie, including Stephen McIntosh as Scrooge's nephew Fred. This character is often portrayed as somewhat young, but McIntosh was only 25 here, which makes the character seem even more youthful than your traditional portrayal. He has a bit more of a sarcastic edge to him than other takes on the character, too, which works well in this scene as he is able to combat his uncle in a war of words, just like in the book. He's also still around when the charity workers enter, so he gets some snarky words in at his uncle's expense.
We're from the Order of Victoria Charity Foundation. We'd like to speak to you about a donation.
Ah, welcome. This jolly old gentleman here is Mr. Scrooge. He's very generous to charities.
My dear nephew.
The charity workers are played by Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker, which is great since they're already an existing duo. They're great as these characters. We also get Bean Bunny as the boy singing A Christmas Carol. Scrooge even throws a wreath at him, which happens because, according to Brian Henson, everyone was kind of annoyed with the overly cute bunny at this point, and they were happy to attack him. Scrooge in these opening scenes swings from cold and subtle to loud and angry.
How would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly
And we get a much different take on the day off scene. At first, he only offers Cratchit half an hour off, until Cratchit talks him up to the whole day. But only because no one else will be open. This historically isn't true. The day off is one of Scrooge's redeeming qualities in the book. I know it's not that big of a deal, as he does ultimately give the day off, but it always sat a little wrong with me. That said, I suppose we could infer this kind of exchange happens every year, and Scrooge is kind of just playing the part to get Cratchit to say what he wants to say. Despite his grumpiness, Scrooge does seem to enjoy spirited debate, so maybe he likes hearing Cratchit plead his case before granting him the day off. That very well could be. When Scrooge leaves the office, Kermit sings One More Sleep Till Christmas, a nice enough song that is accompanied by some amusing antics as the rats close up. In previous musical versions, I've talked about Ain't Christmas Grand songs where a character simply sings about how much they love Christmas, but I have a soft spot for this song. It echoes the same messages as Fred's speech about everyone coming together at Christmas, no matter their class or station. We also see a bunch of characters slide on the ice, just like in the book. The build up to the Marley scene is very effective, as Scrooge's street looks dark and empty. There are, of course, two Marleys here, with Jacob and Robert Marley being played by Statler and Waldorf. They sing Marley and Marley, a villain song about their evil deeds and how Scrooge's fate will be the same as theirs if he doesn't change. Kane plays this scene really well, begging for comfort from his old friends. It's a good song, and it amps up the darkness considerably. Interestingly, the TV version of the movie had a slightly extended version of this scene, with the song being longer and a very amusing line where Scrooge says,
Please, can't we go back to being funny?
it's actually one of the funnier self-aware lines in the script, so I'm a little disappointed it was cut from the final film. I like the song in the scene, as it's extremely memorable, but just don't think the Marleys show enough regret. They gleefully recount a story where they left orphans out in the snow as they evicted them, and it's just a little much. Honestly, if they just cut that one bit, I wouldn't have an issue with the scene. There is a great joke that fans of the book will love where Scrooge says there's more of gravy than of grave about them, and they mock him for his uninspired pun. In fact, I have to imagine that this line is the sole reason they gave the part of the Marleys to Statler and Waldorf, since their whole thing is mocking bad comedy. One of the best things about this version of A Christmas Carol is the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. Instead of casting these parts with existing Muppets, the filmmakers made the decision to create all new Muppets for the parts. So this takes away any distraction. The Ghost of Christmas Past is an angelic creature who floats in midair, and she's voiced by actress Jessica Fox, who was a child at the time. Could have all been Uncanny Valley, but the little bit of it that we have here actually works to make the character otherworldly but believable. The green screen effects here were really quite advanced compared to other Muppet productions, as it was the first time that performers could be removed digitally. It also makes the Marley and Ghost of Christmas Past characters be able to float and fly seamlessly. The scene where Scrooge and Christmas Past fly over London and back in time to his school days really shows off these effects. Not only does it look great, but it also provides some very amusing Gonzo and Rizzo moments. Rizzo hates the flight, and things get even worse when he lands and gets chased by a cat. We see young Scrooge alone at school, and while we do see young Scrooge say Christmas is stupid, we know he's covering for his friends and is actually sad. We see Scrooge grow at school too, but there's no talk of his family. He's left alone at school, but even old Scrooge makes no mention of his father or sister. Instead, we spend some time with Scrooge's headmaster, played by Sam Eagle, who apparently taught Scrooge everything he knows. The headmaster tells him that life is all about business and making money. It's a strange use of time to introduce this character and act like he was the biggest influence on Scrooge, particularly when this is his only scene. Acting like a single character made Scrooge who he is a little simplistic and also confusing because we haven't even gotten to Fezziwig yet. Ultimately, this leads to the film's biggest flaw. This film doesn't understand who Ebenezer Scrooge is. I don't mean it doesn't write him like his book character. I mean the Ebenezer Scrooge we get in this movie. It doesn't understand what makes him tick or how he got to where he is. This is odd, seeing as how it's an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, a story with a whole section dedicated to what makes this man who he is. Let's take a look at some previous versions for comparison. The Albert Finney one has its flaws, but it absolutely knows who Scrooge was. He was a shy and lonely boy who saw a lot more light in the world when he met his love Isabel, but he gradually fell in love with money and lost the best relationship in his life, leaving him nothing more than a cold old man. Easy, great through line. The George C. Scott version. Scrooge was a victim of an emotionally distant and abusive father, but he had a great relationship with his sister. Fezziwig became a real father figure to him, but Scrooge was so insecure about his lack of wealth that he only sought gain, which led Belle to fall out of love with him. Again, it's all there. Some is text, some is subtext, but it's all there. I'll do one more. Scrooged. Frank Cross was an easygoing young man who needed to open up more, but he got taken under the wing of the profit loving Lou Hayward, which led him to only focus on his work at the TV station and abandon Claire, the love of his life. Two of these examples I just gave are from adaptations I have major problems with, but they know who their Scrooge figure is. Now tell me, who is Ebenezer Scrooge in The Muppet Christmas Carol? We get a lot of descriptions of Scrooge, many from the book, but there is just no consistency in his character. For a lot of the movie, Michael Caine plays it extremely subtly and emotionally, but he absolutely loses it on Cratchit and his bookkeepers in the opening scenes. He only wants to give Cratchit half an hour off for Christmas, and the Marleys laugh about the time they foreclosed on an orphanage, leaving children out in the cold. That's cartoon villain stuff, and yet Caine plays the rest of the film like none of this ever happened, and he never acts angry again like in those opening scenes. These Christmas past sequences only muddy the waters more. If the headmaster was this evil mentor to Scrooge, what's the point of the Fezziwig character? Well, in the Fezziwig scene, we see young Scrooge being stingy and complaining about the cost of the party. When Belle breaks up with him, it's not quite clear that it's for love of money. He keeps putting off their wedding because he wants to make more money, but there aren't lines about his nobler aspirations falling off. I think they're going for him caring about money more than her, but it could also just be read that he's being non-committal or something. Again, this is the major problem with Scrooge in the film. I don't know who this guy is. The script assumes everyone knows who Scrooge is, and assumes it doesn't really have to tell us. Most versions don't give us much of Scrooge and Belle, but we at least believe their relationship was once happy and is now gone. Here, they briefly meet at the party and then break up for reasons that aren't clear enough. The upside to this, and I think the saving grace for a lot of this movie, is that Kane is good enough to make us forget the underwritten script. He is so committed to playing Scrooge as seriously as possible that he even delivers a line like,
My first job was here. This is Fuzzy-Wig's old rubber chicken factory.
with the utmost sincerity. That's not to say that there aren't things to like in these Christmas past scenes. The Fezziwig character, of course, is Fozziwig and played by Fozzie Bear in a perfect Muppet joke. We also see Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem performing at the party, with Animal acting quite bored at having to play such a slow song. There's also an amusing cameo by the Swedish chef, who opens up platters of talking grapes. I love how the parties in this movie are filled with Muppets and humans right alongside each other. We also see Scrooge and Belle fall for each other at the party, even if only for a moment. I've mentioned why the breakup scene isn't clear enough, but that's not what people really tend to talk about when they talk about the breakup scene here. They talk about when love is gone. Everything that can be said about this scene has been said, so I'll do the quick version. Brian Henson filmed a scene where Belle, Meredith Braun, breaks up with Scrooge, mostly through the song When Love Is Gone. Disney chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg thought the song was boring and kids wouldn't like it, so he made Henson cut the song. The VHS had it, the original DVD didn't, and for the last 30 years, people have been debating if it should be included or shouldn't. It should be, full stop, I have no nuance on this subject. Why? Well, for one, it's the best song in the whole movie. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking song sung wonderfully by Braun, who was shockingly just 19 here. We also get Michael Caine's Scrooge joining in the song in a tear-jerking moment, with Scrooge barely able to get his words out because he's crying. Why would you cut what is very possibly Caine's finest moment in the film? Additionally, as director Brian Henson rightly pointed out, there's a reprise at the end called The Love We Found. Why would you cut the setup and leave the callback? Plus, if you cut this song, the breakup scene is just a few seconds long, which makes Rizzo crying over it very odd. It really needs to be there. Want even more Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast? Just go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast, where for just $5 a month you can get a bonus episode every month of the year. There I cover various TV shows versions of A Christmas Carol. For $10 a month, you can even vote on what episode I do next. Additionally, for just $1 a month, you can get all episodes 24 hours early. Again, just go to patreon.com/Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast, or follow the link in the description. The Ghost of Christmas Present is a giant Muppet, performed by Jerry Nelson, and a lot of the characters' darker elements are toned down in favor of jolliness and jocularity. It's an extremely memorable performance, and Kane's Scrooge seems to genuinely like this ghost and softens to him considerably. He admits that he's never really liked Christmas, and the ghost accepts the challenge to show him how great it can be. Scrooge usually still has pride by this point in the story and puts up at least a small defense against the ghost, but Kane doesn't. Again, we're back to that this movie doesn't know who Scrooge is thing, but overall, I've warmed to this portrayal over time. I do believe the scene where he duets with his lost love about the end of their relationship would break the man so much that he would be actively reevaluating everything he's just seen. Of course, you have to forget the extremely cruel moments from earlier in the film that don't fit this model of Scrooge. But again, Kane is good enough that you do actually forget them. In the musical number, It Feels Like Christmas, the ghost shows Scrooge all the people in Muppet celebrating on Christmas Day, and we even get a brief moment in a jail cell where a guard and prisoner celebrate together. There's a very brief mention of them visiting a jail in the book, and this is the first time we've seen it referenced. It's also in line with the book's idea of everyone putting aside their differences on Christmas. Scrooge even loosens up and tries to dance along with the Ghost of Christmas Present, which is awkward, but it should be. I think Kane's softer approach to Scrooge works here, as his emotional barriers are all gone. It's also deliberately awkward because it's not like this is a man who knows how to dance. The only thing is, and I'm sorry, I don't love this song. I know. It's just that it's the second Ain't Christmas grand song in the thing, and to me, it's the weaker of the two. I worked in retail for a long time. I have no aversion to Christmas music on the whole, but I really just can't get into the kind of song that is listing things that happen at Christmas.
It's in the singing of a street corner choir. It's going home and getting warm by the fire. It's true wherever you find love. It feels like Christmas.
Okay, this one kind of averts that because it is about how these things we love about Christmas are the same kind of things we should love throughout the whole year and approach our whole lives that way. I like that a lot. But the songs in this movie overall are just a little saccharine on the whole, and this one just crosses the line for me. Also, it sounds a little familiar.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. In a reverse of almost every adaptation, we go to Fred's party here before we go to the Cratchits. And as opposed to the book and many adaptations where Fred's sarcastic joke about Scrooge is taken relatively in stride, Scrooge is deeply offended by it here and asks to leave. What's strange is we don't see Fred showing a nicer side here. He doesn't say, I jest about him, but obviously I love him and I love my sister. Something like that. To show that he's just, having a little joke, but still loves his uncle deeply. We just see the meanness, and I'm not quite sure what it's getting at here. Obviously, maybe it doesn't think kids can understand someone taking a insult like this in stride. I'm not quite sure. But Scrooge is genuinely hurt by it, and it's interesting that it seems to be portraying Fred in the wrong here, not Scrooge. I just feel like it's maybe complicating it a little bit unnecessarily. Anyway, the Cratchit scene is really good, with Kermit and Miss Piggy filling the roles of Bob and Emily Cratchit, and Kermit's nephew Robin playing Tiny Tim. Other various frogs and pigs play their other children. Don't think about the biology there. This was the first film in which someone besides Jim Henson played Kermit, and Steve Whitmire slips into the role quite naturally. The Cratchits sing Bless Us All, and again, it's a little much for me. I like some of the songs in this, but honestly, none of them are fun. It's an extremely moody and often somber affair, and even the more upbeat songs are mid tempo. It's rare for the Muppets to get this saccharine without balancing it with humor, and I just wish there was a fun song in here. The Ghost of Christmas Present does age throughout the day. The Muppets aren't afraid to make it clear that he dies at the end of Christmas. It even happens in a graveyard, where the yet to come scenes also begin and end. Scrooge is left alone by Christmas Present, only to be enveloped by smoke before encountering the final ghost. Like the other ghosts, Christmas Yet to Come gets a great introduction, and the film makes the wonderful decision of having Gonzo and Rizzo duck out at this point, letting the serious scenes play out without their humorous commentary. I know in the previous scene I wasn't sure this was trusting kids enough, but here it absolutely is. Kane is brilliant in these yet to come scenes, always on the verge of tears. Scrooge knows that he's the dead man in these visions, and he just wants to see that someone loves him and that he can have a second chance. The future is gray and rainy, which only makes it more bleak and hopeless. Everything just works in these scenes. I also love the choice of having old Joe played by a spider, suggesting he has one of his arms in everybody's business. The Cratchit scene is absolutely heartbreaking, both on the surface and when you know what was going on in the Muppet organization at the time. Hearing Kermit talk about the first parting among us is a tearjerker when you think about it in the context of Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. In particular, having Jim Henson's most famous character grieve him while acknowledging the need to move on is perfect.
Life is made up of meetings and partings. That is the way of it. I am sure we shall never forget Tiny Tim or this first parting that there was among us.
Whitmire as Kermit and Frank Oz as Miss Piggy really nail the emotions in this scene. For the most part, these yet to come scenes are more sad than scary, but like I said, there's still a grim look to them. The graveyard scene is small and personal, which all works except for one detail. Kane does a great job of selling the transformation and begging the spirit for another chance, but there's something about the score in this scene that doesn't quite work for me. Maybe it needs to be more dramatic, but I don't even know that it's that. A mellower tune would have worked here too. It's just extremely underwhelming. This is the climax of the movie, and what we're getting sounds like a temp track. Usually the movies go big here, and I do tend to think that would be the best choice, but I think it could work with no score, just really anything but what we get. Kane plays the Christmas morning scenes wonderfully, and there's a really sweet moment where Beaker, as one of the charity workers, gives Scrooge his scarf as a thank you for such a generous donation. We also get Bean Bunny in a dual role here, as he's also the boy that Scrooge asks what day it is. It makes perfect sense, and it makes us feel less bad about laughing at his injuries earlier. Scrooge and all the Muppets walk through the streets singing, but unlike the Albert Finney version, it's not excessive. Thankful Heart is a song we haven't heard before, and it's all about Scrooge's new outlook on life. It even includes the phrase share the wealth, which surprisingly hasn't been awkwardly edited out by Disney in recent years. Kane is not exactly a singer, but he's going for it in these scenes, and his emotions come through nonetheless. It's a very believable change. Miss Piggy also gets a great moment, as she is ready to attack Scrooge when he shows up at her door on Christmas Day. Of course, they make up, and everyone sings The Love We Found, which is either a beautiful callback to the best song in the film or just a new song, depending on which version you're watching. There's that famous moment where Gonzo emphasizes Tiny Tim who did not die, which is right out of the book's narration, where it's written in all caps. It's very charming. So yeah, despite being a lifelong Muppet fan and lifelong Christmas Carol fan, I'm still a little split on this one. It's a lot of fun and I enjoy it, and Michael Caine gives a truly great performance. The sincere moments work for the most part, and the comedy works for the most part. Sometimes it feels like it has a grasp on the novel, and other times it doesn't. I think it's a little afraid of the darkness in the book, which is interesting since Jim Henson was never afraid to go there. It also falls more into the for kids side of the Muppets than their previous outings to date. A lot of things from the book are simplified or played differently on the whole, such as Fred making fun of Scrooge, so kids can understand them. The return of Paul Williams as songwriter should have been a slam dunk. He wrote some incredible stuff for both the Muppet movie and Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, but compared to those two, I do find this music a little underwhelming at points. There's just not one fun song here. It's the Muppets. I'm not saying they all have to be upbeat, but even the happy songs, they're kind of mid tempo. When Love Is Gone is the best song by far, and that's the one they tried to cut. That said, this showed the Muppets could go on. Brian Henson's direction is confident and skillful. Steve Whitmire's Kermit is heartfelt and sincere. Gonzo and Rizzo moving to the forefront would kick off their prominence in the new decade, something I always enjoyed. Some of the other characters are more out of focus. Some of the Richard Hunt characters and the Jim Henson characters, understandably. I know that Rolf, in particular, was silenced for a bit, kind of in tribute to Jim Henson. Even though Kermit was Henson's most famous, it was often said that Rolf and his easygoing personality was the most like Jim Henson. Over the years, it's obviously become a classic, and there are many, many people who return to it each year. Let's take a look at where it lands on the Christmas Carol adaptation meter. So, Muppet Christmas Carol ends up with a score of 51.5. Now, if you're keeping up, that means it is right ahead of A Christmas Carol 1938 with Reginald Owen and about 8.5 points behind Scrooge 1935. There are others ahead of it, of course. Our high scorer is still the George C. Scott version. So, as of the end of this season, that will be our high scorer. Again, just thinking ahead, I don't think it's going to stay in that position, but right now, that is our leader. We only had the leader surpassed once this season, which is much different than how many times it was in the past, obviously. But that's only because we started the first season last year. So right now, the George C. Scott version still leads. Of course, it's just my metric 100 plot points. The Muppet version keeps a whole lot of important stuff. I would say it does a much better job of keeping stuff than the 1938 film, which gets a very similar score. Everything is scored 1 point. I don't weigh it based on which I think is more important. If I did, Muppet would be a much higher scorer than A Christmas Carol 1938. But again, it's just a metric of score. I don't even think it's that important, but I know people like it, so I keep it. I talk about it even more because I know people like it. I'm happy to do it. I had that video where I did the scoreboard. And in the future, I'll do one of those again. Don't think it's really enough this season to do an interesting one, but maybe after next season, I'll do one for these 2 seasons. And of course, when I'm finished with all of this, we'll do a big one. But Muppet Christmas Carol 51.5. Not too many things that other versions don't keep. It mostly keeps the main stuff. Now, of course, there is dialogue that other versions don't keep it. When I say dialogue, I just mean anything from the text. Dickens' writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a character speaking when I say book dialogue. I just mean anything from the book. And I think that's one reason why people do like this version for its accuracy. When they talk about its accuracy, they mean that it has quotes right from the book. And I don't really have quotes in my accuracy meter. That's just plot points, character descriptions, things like that. So I know there are plenty of people who would tell you this is the most accurate version. Honestly, and I'll probably talk about this a little more, I don't think there's a metric if you really watch every version that you can call the Muppets the most faithful version. I'm sorry, it just isn't the case. I really don't think so. If it's your favorite, great. That's wonderful. And obviously everyone is judging it by different metrics. But even going by how much text from the book is in the movie, I don't think this is going to be the one with the most. I just don't. I think there are other versions that have more text from the book than this one. So maybe it's just the fact that this one draws attention to when it's taking text from the book, with Gonzo literally being Charles Dickens. Maybe it's that just a lot of people haven't seen those other versions, which fair. But I don't really personally think there's a metric by which you can call Muppet Christmas Carol the most faithful adaptation. Again, my favorite adaptation is not the one that I think has the most stuff from the book. It's the one I think is the most in spirit with the book. So if that's the Muppets for you, great. But I do think there are certain things that are changed that don't make it as faithful as others. So I'm going to talk a little more about this with personal thoughts and wrap up on this episode and talk about my season wrap up coming soon. But also released at the same time, I'm going to have two separate interview episodes. I debated how to do this, but both interviews we talked for a while. So I'm going to release them both separately. They're all going to come out today. You can listen to the one with Liz and Ian, my friends Liz and Ian, big Muppet fans. We had a great conversation. And then my friend Joe, who's a big film guy, filmmaker himself. We talked about his love of Muppet Christmas Carol and other Muppet things as well. So separate episodes going to drop all today. Just look for them on my channels wherever you listen to this, and you can listen to those interviews as well. So there we have it, the one that I know a whole lot of people have been waiting for because it's a favorite of so many, Muppet Christmas Carol. And once you're done with this episode, like I said, there's so much more you can go and listen to. Two separate interviews where I talk with some big fans. We have some great conversation about Muppet Christmas Carol, and I was happy to have them because this is a movie that is so special to so many people, including my guests. So, yeah, a lot of great Muppet talk in those. They're all such fans of not just that, but all Muppet related things, and we talk about a good bit of it. We might have a future episode where we do more Muppet conversations with them because we had a lot of fun talking about our various favorite Muppet things, Christmas and otherwise. But yeah, Muppet Christmas Carol is one that I've been aware of a good bit of my life. But like I said, the first time I saw it, I remember it. And I remember knowing what a Christmas Carol was because I'd seen Mickey's and I think I'd seen other versions, at least a theater version, perhaps. So I wasn't going into it cold, which I think is probably good portion of people's experience with that, is that it was their introduction to a Christmas Carol. And maybe in some cases it's their only Christmas Carol. I know with some people they've told me it's the only one they've seen. And if it's the only one you want to see because you love it so much, hey, that's great. I'm glad it works for you so well, and I'm glad you love it because it's still a beloved classic to this day, and even more than it was when it came out. So this one and the Alistair Sim one are the only ones to me where I felt like I had to talk about their reputation. Maybe I didn't. Maybe there was a way to go about it where I could just not talk about that at all. But it only felt because this is a Christmas Carol completionist podcast that I had to talk about just the reputation of those two. And I mean, obviously, I talk about reviews and how things hold up over time, but with this and with the Alistair Sim one, I feel like there's such understanding in pop culture that these are the versions. And recently, it's been Muppets being this is the only version of A Christmas Carol you need to see. And I don't want to just be reviewing people's perceptions of it because that's not fair. The movie does not go in saying this is the only one you ever need to see. And I would not review the movie that way or blame it for people thinking that about it. I just wanted to get that out of the way right out of the gate because that is so often the conversation around it today that it's not just the definitive version, the best version, but the only version you need. And I just don't like seeing that because, again, it's classic literature. It's not going to stop being adapted. We should just hope for good adaptations, right? If there's going to be more, let's hope they're good. In the same way that if a movie that I think doesn't need a sequel gets a sequel announced, I'll just say, hey, I hope it's good. I hope it lives up to the original in some way. So, yeah, I don't root against more adaptations because, hey, I'm hoping it's enjoyable. Muppet Christmas Carol is one that I don't necessarily watch every year. I do watch it fairly often, but is not on my annual rotation in the way that like the George C. Scott one is or the Muppet Family Christmas is. It doesn't seem that it should be all that shocking that my opinion of it is, hey, I like it a lot. It's good, but it's to me not the perfect adaptation. So I enjoy it when I watch it. I really enjoy Michael Caine's performance. Really like the look of the ghosts. Really enjoy the Gonzo and Rizzo comedy and the little bits of Muppet antics we get at the party because those are really fun. Swedish Chef, the band, because they do include a lot of different Muppets in that scene, which is fun. Because for the most part, most of the main Muppet characters here get little cameos. You get Kermit, Gonzo, and Rizzo in the big parts, but then it's mostly just new ghosts, new Muppets as the ghosts, and Scrooge. So yeah, if kids are watching for their favorite Muppets or adults watching for their favorite Muppets, not going to be as much of them in here as they might expect, but that's okay. Uh, Muppet Treasure Island ended up doing kind of the same thing, to be fair, because you got to cast it based on the book, and often they make new Muppets for certain parts, so it's just how it ends up. And hey, that's fine. Obviously, both have held up, and more people want to see Muppets adapting classic literature, so obviously people are happy with how these turned out. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's all that much new to say about Muppet Christmas Carol, but I did want to analyze it as an adaptation to talk about just how accurate it is to the book, obviously, like I do with any of these, but I'm not going to change anyone's mind about it. I also realize if it's your favorite, it's going to be your favorite. And I don't expect to change anyone's mind with any of these. It's much easier to talk about the ones that nobody knows, like John Grid's Christmas, which I had a lot of things to say about. And I thought was an interesting episode, particularly because no one knows that one. Very, very obscure. And with something like that, if you're wondering, hey, should I check out this thing I just heard of for the first time? I think I can bring some attention to that. And I like bringing attention to lesser known versions. But of course, I'm always going to talk about the iconic versions too. It's just how do I go about it? And with the George C. Scott one, I went about it with here's all the reasons why, in my mind, this is the best version. Because I don't know that all of those are talked about. It's really the little things in that one for me. And with the Alistair Sim one, I mostly wanted to talk about the real high points of that make it so great, like his performance, obviously, and the past storytelling, and of course, talk about the things that I think don't hold up as well with that one. And even with that, there is more to talk about because of all the deviations from the source material. That one takes some pretty serious liberties, despite being the most beloved version. I still think even more than this one. So, with Muppet Christmas Carol, it just has such a reputation that I felt it just had to talk about the reputation right out of the gate, and then just talk through the movie. But you'll see with my guests, we talk about all kinds of things, stuff I didn't even get to here, because obviously there's a lot to talk about here. I think to talk about it properly, you have to talk about the Muppet history, Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. People always talk about Henson. Richard Hunt also died. Very, very tragic. AIDS-related complications, and just he was an incredible performer, a great, great voice, obviously, and he was integral to the Muppets. So they lost their two guys before this, and it really changed them. So this was a loving tribute to both of them. I tend to think with this, and maybe there are people who disagree with this. This is just my take, and I saw this as a kid, so I think it's a fair point that the first three Muppet movies feel more in that vein of the Muppet Show, where it's for everybody. Kids will like parts, adults will like parts, but it never feels kiddie. And I think Muppet Christmas Carol falls a little more on the for kids side. Nothing wrong with the Christmas Carol for kids. It's a really, really good Christmas Carol for kids. But it falls more on the for kids side than the other Muppet movies to date. And I think for me, that's why it's not going to be my favorite because there are good adult, I don't mean adult, there is that too, but the adult versions of A Christmas Carol, really serious, empathetic, deeply emotional takes on the story that deal with all of the socioeconomic issues in an even better way than this. And that's okay. Okay, it's for kids. That's like Share the Wealth in there. Don't get me wrong. Share the Wealth is in this version. But you look at the Scott version, you look at even the Seymour Hicks version, the Thim version. They're dealing with those issues head on in a really, really great way and for adults. So I think as we grow up, we should love these ones we grew up with, and they're nostalgic and they still have a lot of value and merit. But we should also be checking out the other ones, you know? So if Muppet Christmas Carol is your only version, I would challenge you to check out some others. And you still will very likely like the Muppet one better, which is great. And I'm so thrilled. It means so much to so many people. I love it. It's a really good movie. But again, it's not the only one. So I hope people keep that in mind. When you listen to my interviews, you'll hear a lot of great things about this and the other Muppet movies. We had a lot of fun. So I'm just keeping those pretty long interviews up because I think you deserve to hear it. We had a lot of great conversation. Next week, I am going to be doing my season wrap up. Had a lot of fun with this last year, where I just kind of go over all the ones I talked about this season. We'll talk about those, talk about some themes, talk about all the best and worst and everything in between. Additionally, I'll be going through comments, questions, anything people leave on videos that I want to talk about. So if you have questions for me, really any question you want to ask related to A Christmas Carol or just about anything, really, movies, TV, whatever, I'll be happy to answer it. As I said before, just don't ask, hey, when are you going to cover this version? I'll get to it, I promise, for going chronologically. So any question you want to ask, I will happily answer it on my season wrap up episode, just like I did last year. So stay tuned for that next week. Additionally, on my Patreon, if you subscribe for $5 a month or more, I do one episode a month where I review a TV episode of A Christmas Carol. This month is going to be on Little House on the Prairie, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast, and if you are celebrating today, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas Eve and a Christmas tomorrow. Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast is written, edited, and hosted by Colin Murr. Theme music is Christmas Day by TRG Banks, and TRG Banks' Snowfall is also used for interstitial music. Clips in this episode are from the Muppet Christmas Carol and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing on YouTube will be a big help to me. You can also back me on Patreon for early episodes, bonus episodes, and the right to vote in polls. Link is in the description. I'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. Until then, make sure to live in the past, the present, and the future, and ensure that the spirits of all three strive within you.